So this is called evidence-based practice. The code is 5CO02. So this module, as the name goes, is people's practice, right? When we say practice, it's people's practice, but it is very evidence-based in line with the present times, all right? So what we want to accomplish at the end of the day, all right, through the 3 sessions for this particular module is, number one, by understanding, all right, by understanding the strategies of effective critical thinking and decision making, you should be able to make very sound decisions in people practice. So this is number one. So we're going to look a little bit at that, all right? And then by looking at the importance of decision making, you can generate good strategies to solve your people practice issues. And finally, you can evaluate the effectiveness of your strategies by looking at impact and value of people practice to your organization. Okay, so this module is essentially going to help you look at few things. What you will learn here is a concept of evidence-based, all right, how it can be applied to decision making, all right. You will look at a range of tools, analysis tools and methods, okay, how you can use these tools to diagnose organizational issues, challenges and opportunities. You will look at the principles of critical thinking, all right, how you can apply them to your and other people's idea. And finally, you will look at ethical perspectives that can influence decision making. Now, so let's first go and look into the assignment question, okay, for this particular module. All right, so just to read out a little bit for you. So this unit addresses the significance of capturing robust quantitative and qualitative evidence to inform meaningful insight to influence critical thinking. What we are looking at in this module is how do we actually generate data, useful information, qualitative and quantitative information that we can use when we make decisions, hence evidence-based practice. So whatever decision we make, we want to be able to back it with very valid evidences, all right? We want to look at a critical lens, but also an ethical lens that can help us in our decision making, that can ensure people don't come back and sue us because of our emotional decision making, the lack of criticality in our decision making, okay? So let's straight jump into the question. So your company has been invited to submit a briefing paper for a regional people practice event that will share insights and good practice on a range of people practice processes and practices. The topic area that your manager has chosen is evidence-based practice and has selected you to represent the company by creating the briefing paper for the event. In addition, your manager has asked you to analyze and review 3 sets of performance data in readiness for the forthcoming heads of departments meeting. So you already see, there are 2 tasks there, right? Okay. Preparation of task is the standard. Okay. I'm going to straight go into task 1. So let's read together. So you have been asked to prepare a briefing paper that is to be given to people practitioners at a regional event to share insights and good practice. Okay. So your paper needs to inform, your paper needs to brief people. The paper needs to provide understanding of approaches, okay? What are the approaches available out there to support effective critical thinking and decision making within the HR remit, okay? Within the HR ambit area of HR, okay? That's what HR remit means. I'm going to go to task 2 now. Task 2 is a little bit different. So in preparing for the forthcoming, it's a data analysis and review assignment, okay? In preparing for the forthcoming department heads meeting, your manager has asked you to prepare a range of information and interpretation for use at the meeting, okay? Below are 2 sets of data that have been collected by a 360-degree review for Department A, Table 1. So it is the feedback that has been elicited from employees on their line manager. Table 2 is from the customers that use the goods from Department A, right? Okay, so all of these are about Department A. One is from the employees on their line manager. The other is from the customers. So you are seeing manager in the center, You have employees on the inside, you have customers, internal and external feedback is being given here. All right. So use one analytical tool to review the two data sets to reveal any themes, patterns, and trends. Okay. So topic one, we're going to look at evidence-based practice per se. All right. There are 4 items here under evidence-based practice. We want to look at definition of evidence-based practice. What are the common sources of evidences? All right. We want to critically appraise evidence, and then we want to look at what are the common misconceptions when it comes to evidence-based practice. Okay. Now, there's a lot of definitions that could be at the back of our mind, right? But at the heart of evidence-based practice, okay, the center of evidence-based practice, it is always about how we use critical thinking, all right, and the best available evidence in order to make good decisions. So when we make decisions, we don't want to say, oh, I made the decision because it felt right. Oh, no. As people practitioners, we do not want to do that. We want to say that, oh, I made that decision because I've applied, I have thought about it critically, and I have weighed all available evidence. And based on these evidences, these decisions were made, all right? And for people practitioners, especially those dealing with IR issues, industrial relation issues, this is very important, because the last thing you want is for your decision as a people practitioner to come back and backfire on you. As people practitioners, we are often in a very tough spot, both ways, with the employees and the employers. So to safeguard ourselves, to make decisions that are sound and reasonable, we have to make it become very evidence-based in nature. All right. When we make evidence-based decisions, when we embed this as part of our practice, right, the decisions and actions we make are going to give us a good effect, all right? And it's not so much reliant on things like what someone said, what my boss thinks, or based on my past experience. All these sources can be very subjective in nature. We all know that. Decision making is not supposed to be like that, all right? So evidence-based HR practice brings together published research and people analytics with professional practice and stakeholder opinions. Okay, now, okay, so in an evidence-based practice, okay, we commonly combine 2 things: critical thinking and best available evidence. All right, so we don't look at untrustworthy sources. Okay, we don't look at things that are very subjective and personal. All right, so why we need to adopt this evidence-based practice? Because a lot of management decisions, all right, have a huge impact on people. All right, it has a huge impact on organizations. So we are ethically obligated, all right, to make decisions that can, well, not only look at the well-being of our workers, but also ensure our organization's success. So it puts us, as I said, it puts us in a very important spot. So if we make great decisions, our employees will be very good, very well off, and they will thrive and be productive, and they will continue supporting the organization's overall success. Okay, let us move on. So it is, when we say evidence-based practice, okay, it is important for us to understand what evidence we have and what are the sources we should actually get this evidence from, okay, and how we choose to use this best available evidence. We must be very, very detailed, very thorough. We must be able to leave no stone unturned when we practice evidence-based practice. Okay, you will understand as we come to it. There are 4 sources that underpin evidence-based practice. Okay, this actually helps for the advancement of evidence-based practice, and it is very much seen, all right, as the future of HR and learning, all right. You will understand why as we go by each of these sources, okay. So here on the screen, as you can see, we have scientific evidence, we have organizational data, we have practitioners, professional expertise, and then we have stakeholders' values and concerns. So we're going to delve into them one by one now, okay? So when we look at scientific literature, okay, as a source of evidence for evidence-based practice, we are literally talking about the empirical studies and evaluated academic research that are available out there, which we can use to make very good decisions, okay? What do we mean by empirical studies? It's basically studies that has been carried out using sound research methodologies and methods. There are very less biases. It's a very valid and reliable study. How do you know a study is valid and reliable? If it is published in reputed journals, then we know that these are empirical studies, because journals will not simply publish studies which are not empirical in nature, all right? And this can also be academic research by thought leaders, very well cited leaders, okay? So that kind of scientific literature is very much valid for you to use as a source of evidence, okay? Now, then we have organizational evidence, the biggest chunk of evidence that is available to us as people practitioners. Basically, it's data, knowledge, and insights that are within the organization, which we can tap on to make good decisions, okay? Then we have stakeholder evidence. This can be evidence from our employees internally, our customers, board members, suppliers. All this insight can actually help us to make better decisions, okay? Finally, it boils down to us as people practitioners. What is our own experience? Okay, some of us may have been in HR for 20 years, 30 years, right? And we have dealt with a lot of HR related matters. So much so we know things from the back of our hand. So our views and insights, all right, on the issue being investigated could possibly also work. It could also be put into context, because these experiences have actually augured well. These experiences have actually brought some impact in the way we make decisions in the past, because we make them based on our experience, okay? So when we look at scientific evidence, right, we can look at them in published academic journals, right? So if we look at management research per se, very huge in nature, all right? It looks at so many different topics out there under the ambit of HRM, okay? Ranging from merger success, effect of financial incentive, non-financial incentives, how to improve employee commitment and recruitment, and so on. Sometimes if you are trying to implement something new, right? If you're trying to propose an idea, go and read the academic journals. These journals actually have some very valid sources. Why? Because researchers go out and talk to practitioners. They talk to respondents. The respondents they sample are usually people along the same area of work that we are part of. And a collection of that responses that is presented to you as scientific research can be very useful and valuable to you on the long run, okay? So there is also non-management discipline research out there, all right, that actually looks at typical problems, you know, such as conflict. It looks at diversity, inclusion, and so on, right? It looks at how to better manage, how to deal with remote work. Even remote work post-pandemic, there is already research available about that, all right? So while we have looked at these research findings as part of our student learning experience, even now we are looking at research findings as part of this professional course. All right, research is always being churned out. All right, knowledge keeps evolving. All right, so in order to be up to date, you must know how to search for studies, and you must be able to judge whether these studies are trustworthy or not. So not everything you read online is the ultimate truth. Okay. Okay. All right. Second source of evidence is organizational evidence itself. The organization itself is a form of evidence. It can be a business, it can be a hospital, it can be a government agency, it can be a school, it can be any institution, and organizational evidence has many forms. All right. We could be looking at financial data such as cash flow and PORs, or business measures. Okay, we could be looking at non-financial data as well. But commonly, we like to tag financial data to understand performance. This evidence can come from our internal stakeholders, our employees. It can come from our external stakeholders, who are our customers and clients, who through customer satisfaction indexes, through repeat purchases, through product return statistics, through product defaults, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of organizational evidence available out there for our for us to tap on when we are trying to make decisions. Okay. Now, then we have the stakeholder evidence. Okay. So this is the fourth source of evidence. Okay. The last source of evidence. All right. We've looked at sorry, this is not the fourth one. I think we've, yeah, it is. All right. So this is about our stakeholders. Who are our stakeholders? There can be anyone, any individual or group who are implicated by the decisions made in an organization. So we have two types of stakeholders. All right. Internal stakeholders are our employees, managers, board members, and so on. External stakeholders, outside stakeholders, are people who are beyond the organization, our suppliers, our customers, our shareholders, the government, the public at large, the society, the community. These are all people who are external stakeholders. Why? Because they may have a probable interest, or they may be impacted or implicated by our business and the decisions we make. So their values and concerns, all right, shows what they believe in when it comes to our organization. And this is very important. What our employees think of us is important. What our customers, how they perceive us is important. So, which boils down to us now looking at evidence and critically appraising. It is not enough to know that we have four sources of evidence and we can draw upon this evidence. We know evidence can be imperfect and misleading. All right. Evidence could be overrated, overstated, all right? Claims that are very strong could actually be based on a single person's opinion, and it does not reflect the entire organization, or maybe that information is not reliable altogether. Colleagues' confident opinion for the effectiveness of a practice may be biased, right? Because it is an anecdote, it is someone's opinion, right? A long-standing way of doing things in an organization, or we've always done it like this. I'm sure you guys can relate to this. It may not have been evaluated, right? Just because it's been done that way, it may not be the best way, or it may not have actually been giving you what you are supposed to be getting. So every evidence out there deserves to be critically appraised, okay? And it must be done systematically to understand how trustworthy and relevant this particular evidence is. So now we know we need evidence to make decisions. There are many, many ways to evaluate evidences, all right, depending on the source, but there are some questions we can ask, all right? When we do evidence evaluation, we want to know where and how this evidence was gathered, right? We want to understand why do we need to ask this question? Where was this evidence gathered? How do we use an evidence in the United States for company situations in, for example, Sudan? Not relevant, right? So the location where that evidence was collected may not be reflective. So if we're looking at scientific journals and the case is about the studying evidence-based practice in the US, it may not be altogether applicable. Then we ask, how was this evidence gathered? Was there a scientific method incorporated? You're going to learn about this later, all right? Or was it just a very informal way of gathering data? So in that sense, how valid or reliable is that particular evidence which was gathered? Now, second question, is this the best available evidence? Right? Is there any other evidence apart from this evidence that can be used? Or is this the only evidence that is there? And is this evidence actually sufficient for us to reach a conclusion? Or do we need to actually go and look for more evidence? Okay. And then here's the acid test. Could this evidence be biased in any way? We need to look at a lot of things when we are making decision. These 4 circles represent the 4 sources of evidence: research and evaluation from scientific evidence, practitioners' experience from practitioners' evidence, stakeholders, their values and concerns, context, organizational evidence. So if we are able to look at this and come to a decisions, our decisions are going to be sound and well-rounded. However, take that with a pinch of salt. Not all evidences may be available for us when we are trying to make a decision. All right. Okay. There are some common misconceptions that arise in evidence-based practice. Okay. So a lot of evidence-based practice, the first misconception is to ignore the practitioner's professional experience. Why? Is because a lot of people think evidence-based practice means looking at the hard facts, all right, not looking at soft facts, all right? Because evidence-based practice says we must look at things from all 4 sources, including experiential evidence, the evidence of professional people practitioners' evidence, right? So, and in evidence-based practice, we don't actually have any extra weightage for one source compared to another, all right? This professional experience, all right, and judgment here is important, especially if we can ascertain that it is trustworthy and relevant, all right? And this experiential evidence is very important. Second misconception, a lot of people think evidence-based practice is all about numbers and statistics. Yes, it does involve seeking out the best available evidence from many sources, but it is not just about numbers and quantitative data. Okay, you don't need to be a statistician to do evidence-based practice, all right? But you having a little bit of statistical knowledge will help when you are evaluating certain things that are data-driven, all right? Sample size, statistical versus practical significance, confidence intervals, and so on. I'm going to show you these things can be easily understood without mathematics. So it's not so much about being able to do statistics, rather about statistical thinking, all right? When you are especially dealing with numbers, okay? Now, third misconception. Because managers need to make decisions quickly, you don't have time for evidence-based practice, all right? So this is a bit sticky. I know most of the time we need to take decisions, but when we take decisions, we don't want to fall back on those decisions, right? So we want to be able to train ourselves to make quick decisions using the best available evidence. So our ability to make good, fast decisions, for example, when we want to evacuate a leaking nuclear power plant, or how to make emergency landing, we must know about emergency procedures. We must know what are the instruments available out there that can actually provide trustworthy evidence about radiation level or altitude. So without some kind of evidence, our decision is also going to be distorted, even if it needs to be made as fast as possible. Fourth misconception. Every organization is unique, so the usefulness of scientific evidence is limited, right? So a lot of practitioners don't like to use scientific evidence because they say, oh, this study was done in a different hemisphere. This study was not done in an organization like mine. My organization is unique in its own regard. Okay, so yes, it is true, but a lot of times, all right, a lot of times management issues, according to Peter Drucker, are repetition of familiar problems cloaked in the guise of uniqueness. How different can one organization be from another? We are all moving towards similar goals: profit, performance, market share, and so on. So we must be more similar to each other than different, although the degree and levels of problems that we face may be very much different. Okay. But despite the promising nature of HR analytics, okay, there are a lot of challenges surrounding it as well. When we say HR analytics or people analytics, a lot of senior management especially may or may not buy the idea, or they may have too much of expectations on the other spectrum of things. All right. So one of the biggest challenges is there's a lot of inflated expectations because of the perceived ROI that is shared. For $1 spent, it's about $13 ROI. That's a very huge return on investment we are talking about. That means by implementing HR analytics, you can actually earn a whole lot more in terms of ROI. But that can also be some sort of an inflated expectations if you do not take into consideration the market that you're a part of, the maturity of the HR analytics and things like that. Now, a lot of us think we need a lot of data, but the thing is we already have the data. What we need is a lot of guiding questions, all right? We need a lot of guiding questions, right? That can actually lead us on to the data, all right? A lot of us prefer to use gut feelings, like it or not, all right? So we don't want to adopt to HR analytics, okay? A lot of us think the tools are very difficult to learn to do the job. So, it's hard to learn them. We don't believe in the frameworks of HR analytics. We don't have time. We're just focused on productivity, all right? And our structure may be very conservative, that it does not allow us. It's very manual in nature that we cannot actually employ HR analytics. These are some of the more prominent challenges that are out there where HR analytics is concerned, all right? But HR analytics is also the foundation of evidence, right? And this evidence can actually, we know it can help us make good decisions, therefore contributing in a positive manner to the organizations that we operate, right? So when we talk about HR analytics, we must understand that it is very much driven by data, all right? And this data actually helps people like us in people practice, all right, to make good business decisions. And today, our human resource departments have become very much data driven. Today, we collect and analyze data from a lot of sources when we are making decisions alongside our managers and directors. We want to look at information that we have in hand. All right. So how do we go about collecting that data? All right, as HR analysts, HR practitioners, data collectors. So there are two major methods for data collection where research is concerned. We have the qualitative versus the quantitative way of collecting and analyzing data. All right. So the concept behind qualitative research is very much about understanding human behavior based on the perspective of the sample or respondents whom we talk to. All right. So this can actually give us a reality of that particular context. Okay. Versus quantitative research is about discovering facts about a social phenomena. We want to understand the hard facts. And this is very numerical in nature. All right, it's very fixed and it's very measurable in reality. Okay, so while qualitative can give you that reality for that particular place or organization, quantitative can actually give you, because you are going to speak to far more number of respondents for quantitative research, it will give you a very generalizable kind of outcome. Okay, so for qualitative, we talk to people, we observe people to collect the data. All right, we get all this interviews done, and then we look at what people said in these interviews to get the themes, primary themes. For example, let's say we spoke to managers of various organizations in Oman about diversity and inclusion. All right. So based on these conversations we had, we're going to go and transcribe these interviews and look at what are the common themes mentioned by them in the answers, what are the uncommon themes that they highlighted, and then we report it back as our findings. Okay. Now for quantitative, on the other hand, we send out surveys, we send out questionnaires to people, and then when the results come out, we put them into statistical softwares to analyze the numerical data, to come up with comparison, and we report them using statistical analysis. All right, so it's two different ways. Which one is more important? I would say it depends on the situation and scenario that we are trying to collect the data for. Okay, so why we collect data? Because there is a legislative requirement, okay, to comply with working hours, okay, from OSHA, SOXO, EPF. EPF is our Employees Provident Fund in Malaysia, all right. We collect data so that we can plan future activities. We want to know what our recruitment needs. We want to know what kind of reward system should we implement, what kind of HR activities is needed for the upcoming year, okay. The data can inform us on how to decide on operational and service plans, all right, to develop the business. Our data can actually contribute to wider industry data. Let's say we are part of we represent HR in the oil and gas industry. So that can actually contribute to HR and oil and gas data on the larger perspective, okay. Data is also important. Collection of data is important, especially when there is a claim against the organization. These are the data that we can tap on as supportive evidence in the event there is a claim on us. Okay, now we want to move on to the key metrics of HR. Okay, so there are 11 key metrics that we can look at. All right, it's represented in this particular diagram, right? So I'm going to, so they are different representations, but they are essentially moving around the same things, right? So if you look at this, we have absence rate, absence per manager, dealing with absenteeism. We have overtime expense, employee productivity index. We have training expenses per employee, training effectiveness index related to training. We have training efficiency, employee happiness, all right, employee voluntary turnover rate, talent turnover rate, and retention rate. So these are some of the matrices that we are already actually having in our workplaces, and these form the essential key matrices. There are 3 different types of sources for HR data, okay. Number one is the data that comes from HRIS, HR information system. We all have that in our organization, all right, HRIS data. The other is other kinds of HR data that are there. And finally, we have business data. These are all the sources that is available to us internally within our organizations when we want to make sense of data and use them as evidence in our evidence-based practices, okay? So it's important for us to collect data and analyze them, all right, as part of our hiring process. Without data, it's very difficult for us to understand what are the employee needs, what is the human resources that are needed, okay, and what kind of employees are needed, and so on, right? So this data that we have, this recruitment data that we have, can actually give us answers to several questions. Number one, are there departments that could benefit from greater diversity in their team? Does the organization have all the necessary skills and expertise? Which departments are lacking in certain skills and expertise? So Without this recruitment data, it's very hard for us to churn and analyze that information that answers these three questions, okay? Then we look at performance data. We look at before when we're hiring them, then we look at when they are already with us, all right? We know performance data is good for us to monitor employee performance. A lot of us are already doing this, all right? We know our decisions of hiring is correct or incorrect by looking at the performance of the organizations, all right? So some of the metrics we can measure is speed of being promoted, the time recruits take to get to full performance, and how much profit is generated per employee. So this can actually guide us on whether or not we have made a good hire. And if the outcome is not, how do we adjust our methods so that we don't actually hire someone who is generating low profit or someone who is taking a very long time to get to full performance. See, again, the data is helping us to tweak our decision-making process in real time, okay? Now, since we have the data, how do we communicate the data? Okay, let's say we've collated all the salary of the driver, the manager, right? The drivers. Now the manager asked the following questions. What is the average salary? What is the highest salary? What is the median salary? Most people are paid what salary? What is the range of salary for department A? This reminds us of our assignment question, isn't it? Okay. All right. So these are some formulas. Okay. A lot of us have already done this somewhere in our field of studies before. The mean, the median, the mode, and the range. Okay. But I'm just going to run through it with all of you. All right. So to find the mean, you add up all the numbers, you divide it by how many values are there to get the mean. All right. It's the average value. So this can be used to know average salaries paid for senior executive or executive level. What about median, the middle number, right? Which is when you stack the salaries of all your executives, which is the salaries that are in the middle, all right? So that will be the median salary, okay? Now mode, right? So if all the numbers are the same, there is no mode. If there are different numbers, but there is one number that is repeated, then that is the mode number, the most frequently repeated number. Okay. For example, you want to look at average absenteeism rate, which is the mode. You will look at the mode. All right. Now then we look at range, difference between highest and lowest. This applies to salaries as well. What is the range, increment range we are looking at? So how can we use HR information? How can we create information that is more easy for us to analyze and easy for us to use? So most of us are using computerized systems, databases. A lot of us are still using spreadsheets, right? And when we are using all this, we ask ourselves, how often do we need to update this information? Does this information need to be updated individually or collectively? And we know outdated data is going to cause a lot of embarrassment. Some of us have been there. We've presented data which was outdated. This is very common, yeah, not updating data and making decisions out of outdated data. Very dangerous as well, okay? So in order to manage data, all right, in order to manage data, we have policies and procedures on how to collect and manage them in a professional manner so that we can use this as a source of evidence. So we all have policies and procedures. I'm not going to ask you to name, but you know what are the organizational policies and procedures in place where data collection and management is concerned. If you don't know, go and find out. Okay, you need to know this. So how do we present this data now? What is the methodology out there that we can use to present our data? So we can use bar charts, pie charts of different types. We can use colors, broken lines, dashes, shadings. All right. We can analyze and interpret the data and bring out the findings, okay, to make good decisions. All right. And we can tell people how these findings can be useful, all right, by explaining, number one, what is the area that we have investigated, how we have analyzed and interpreted the data. I'm going to show you an example of all of this later on. Okay, so Tableau dashboard is very good. A lot of people are using it increasingly these days. All right, data is presented graphically and the visualizations are very good, powerful as well. All right, you also can have, when you have a large amount of data, this kind of charts are very good. Pivot charts are very good to show you the kind of data. So there are quite a number of analysis tools which can be used in people practice. Okay, we have all these are the analysis tools that are available out there. Environmental analysis tools, the PASTEL, all right, SWOT, okay. We have strategic review, we have future state analysis, Porter's 5 force, force field, ANSOF, fishbone, critical incident analysis, cause and effect, and so on. So we're going to look at a lot of this after this. And then there are analysis methods, which are interviews, observations, questionnaires, work sampling, examination of organization metrics, and comparison with sector or industry metrics. And then we have future state analysis. Okay, so future state analysis is a little bit different in the sense that you always start with where you are now, where you want to be in the future, all right, and what kind of design of organization that is needed to bridge that particular gap of where you are now and where you want to be in the future. It's a very futuristic model, very future focused. It looks at a very wholesome review of the organization. All right, it looks at, it takes a hard look at what doesn't work and what works. All right, it's a very holistic process. It looks at everything, the system, the structures, people practices, the rewards, performance measures, policies, and so on and so forth. So this is a very good analysis tool if you want to do some long-term planning for your business. All right, now let's move on. Then we have force field analysis. Okay, it was created by Kurt Lewin, 1940. All right, during his work as a social psychologist. It's also used in business. All right, especially where decision making is concerned. All right, so in force field analysis, all right, we are actually looking at two things. One, what drives change. The other is what resists change. And the goal is always to maintain equilibrium. What is it that we need to do to maintain equilibrium? Okay, so either we need to strengthen the driving forces or weaken the resisting forces. Don't worry if I'm going too fast. I'm going to come back to this and show you some visual representation of this. Okay, but what you need to understand is for force field analysis, it is a macro and micro, because it can be external, it can be internal. All right, you can use this externally as well as internally. What is actually driving change against what is actually resisting change? Okay, and then you have the ANSOF matrix. This is a very popular matrix taught in business schools. All right, very good way to visualize what can be done for growth opportunities. This is especially important for growth opportunities. Okay, I'm going to show you an example after this. All right, I'm going to show you an example of all of those things I spoke about after this. Okay, so we have products on x-axis and markets on y-axis. All right, so when you say market here, it can be geographical market, it can be customer segment also. All right, so we look at growth from a market and product perspective. We want to see first, connect with the idea of critical thinking, and then we want to see how critical thinking actually applies in evidence-based practice. Why are we bringing critical thinking here at this particular juncture? Okay, so critical thinking, we all know, in principle, we know the word, we've heard the word, we understand that it exists, right? But what exactly is it? All right, it's essentially our ability to think well. When we say a person is a sound thinker, a wise person, a good thinker, this person is usually able to reflect very well on ideas, on opinions and arguments of others. That means they're not self-opinionated, but they take the opinions of themselves and everyone else around them, and they have a way of looking at these opinions and then deciding which is the best. Okay, so for people professionals, we have three parts to critical thinking. All right, the first one is, of course, to criticize ideas, opinions and arguments of others. All right, now then we see how we can construct arguments and opinions of ourselves that we are communicating to others. All right, thirdly, all right, is to identify when somebody is actually using critical thinking techniques, all right, that can actually impact our ability to build a case or argument in a business perspective. So it is definitely one of the most important components of evidence-based practice, because it is a thinking skill that consists of evaluation of arguments. So from this morning, right, all we have looked at is evidence, evaluation of evidence, types of evidences, ways to look for evidences, ways to collect data that can be turned into evidences. What is the best available evidence, all right? Now, how do we take that evidence and now use it to think in order to make decisions? So critical thinking is going to act as a bridge between the evidence that we have and the decisions that we make. So basically, you can summarize that critical thinking is one of those skills that prevents you from being stagnant or stuck in life, all right? Instead, you can use it to be very proactive in any situation and apply it for your personal growth, right? So it will help you increase your chances of overall satisfaction and happiness in all aspects of your life, okay? Ethical theories, some of us may have learned this in our university days. They are there to actually give us a very good guidance, okay, on what our ethical obligations are, okay. They help us build a single storyline, all right, that we must do no matter what, all right. As a human being, this is how we conduct ourselves, or as a boss, this is what we can or cannot do. And every other boss in the world knows this is the ground rule, right? So in the field of business ethics, all right, they do appeal to one or more ethical theories in order to determine what is right or wrong in particular situations. Why are we talking about ethical perspectives? Is because in evidence-based practice, while we are presented with various sources of evidences, we are also ethically obligated when we are trying to make a decision, right? So there are several ethical theories we're going to look at now, beginning with utilitarianism. Okay, it's a mouthful, all right. Utilitarianism basically looks at what is the right thing to do in any situation which will bring the best outcome, okay. So basically, when we make a business decision or business conduct decision, we will pick the decision that will bring the greatest good for the greatest number of individuals, all right. Basically, this is the total benefit enjoyed by all the parties affected, all right. An example of utilitarianism here, for example, you are coming up with a policy, okay. The policy may be something that is arising out of sexual harassment incidences, all right. So this policy may not be well accepted by several staff force who are very hell-bent on the old ways of doing things, right? But this policy also, when looked at from a larger perspective, we know can actually benefit more than ever the number of individuals in this organization. So we go ahead and implement the policy because it does the greatest good to the greatest number of individuals. So utilitarianism basically is the best decision with the best outcomes for all. Okay. Now, Kantianism or deontology, as we commonly know it, is about the absolute rule, okay, that must be followed no matter what. All right. So in Kantianism, it is absolute that businesses must treat all persons with respect. All right. So we are obligated to do it no matter what. All right. So we cannot deviate from that. So when we make a decision under the ambit of Kantianism, all right, Kantian rule, right, we must ensure that one, you see, it's bringing greater good, and there is no tolerance to this. All right. For example, people's privacy. There is no two ways around people's privacy or people's rights to resign. All right. We cannot say you cannot resign. That is anti-Kantianism. All right. Everyone as a staff force has the right to resign. Every employee has the right to take a lunch break. Right. Every employee has the right to leave work on time. All right. That is something we must respect under the Kantianism principle. All right. Okay. Are you clear with utilitarianism and Kantianism so far?
The first one, Ma'am, please.
Okay. Please ask question. What do you not understand about? So for example,
what kind of things this?
For example,
Yeah, for example,
you are given few choices to make. All right. If you choose choice A, 10 people in your organizations will benefit. If you choose choice B, 50 people in your organization will benefit. So naturally, you will go with choice B because it is the right thing to do, which is going to generate the best outcome. All right. But in Kantianism, when you look at it, you must choose what is you are morally obligated to do. Mostly it's moral obligation. You cannot deviate from it. Like, for example, religion, where religion is concerned, right? We cannot deviate from that. We cannot change rules and go against the religious rules, isn't it? So that can be a form of Kantianism as well. Respect towards what has been predetermined by religion, by race, by culture, and so on. For example, if you go to China, one of the nice rules is that when someone offers you to eat, you cannot say, I'm done. When you say you're done, it means you're not satisfied, right? So that's one of those very funny cultural things that happen around us. So when you go to a different country, read up, understand what is the general or universal rule in that country so that you don't end up making mistakes. Okay, now let's move on. We have the third one is social contract theory or contractarianism. Okay, contractarianism. Okay, so when we are looking at which rule to follow, okay, we want to look at what is the most ideal. All right, rational and ideal. All right. So, for example, businesses exist with the permission of the society, right? So long as the business acts in ways that benefit the society. So businesses can only exist with the permission of the society if they act in a way that benefit the society. So under social contract theory, it is believed businesses must make decisions that will benefit the society at large, which provides maximum benefits to the society. So if you look at corporate, this particular strategy of corporate social responsibility, it is very much built based on the social contract theory. A lot of our organizations, we do community work, we do a lot of outreach, engagement, and even in our businesses, right, we have sustainability embedded as part of it. Why? It's because it benefits the society, the world at large. So whatever decisions we make, it should not deprive, it should not bring onto the community a difficult kind of loss. if you look at case studies, there are some case studies on BHP that had an oil spill, right? So they made that decision to not say sorry, to not apologize. So that actually blew things up on them because it was not benefiting the society. It was in fact bringing detrimental effects to the society. Okay, are you clear with social contract so far? Ethical theories are always a little bit dry and difficult to understand and comprehend, but they are also very important for our businesses to exist. Okay, then we have virtue theory. Okay, here we don't talk about rules at all, but we talk about the kind of people or organizations we want to be and what kind of examples we need to follow to become that kind of people or organization. All right, this kind of theory is very modernist in nature or postmodernist in nature because it allows employees to actually demonstrate virtues of honesty, diligence, responsibility, and compassion in their work, right? Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, he believed that ambition is virtue, but employees who put their goals at all costs may overlook virtues. That means they don't focus on what is important, all right? They put profit above everything else. The virtue theory is very interesting because it gives a sense of goodness to an organization, right? It takes out, doesn't take out it, while profit is the primary objective, it actually puts a good personality or a good set of virtues to the organization that is driven towards that profit. Okay, feminist theory is not necessarily just about women, all right, or it's only for women, although traditionally when we say the word feminism, it refers to women. Okay, it looks at concepts such as caring, interdependence, and ethical requirements of a particular relationship. Feminist theories are very Eastern in nature. In our Eastern culture, we very much apply feminist theories when we make decisions. Okay, we want to look at, while we do want to make business decisions that are beneficial to our profit margins, we also want to apply some level of feminist ethics, okay, such as we want to be caring towards our employees. We want to ensure there is a good sense of interdependence among our employees, all right, and our relationships are not severed with them when we make these decisions. So these decisions are made with a lot of things taken into consideration. You have today been introduced to what evidence-based practice is and how you can apply it to decision making. We've looked at tools and methods, all right, to diagnose and understand organizational issues, challenges, and opportunities. You have looked at the principle of critical thinking and how you can use it for yourself and others. And finally, we have been exposed to ethical perspectives that we can use to influence our decision-making process. So to sum it up, in evidence-based practice, while we do have a stringent set of rules and methods that we can use to collect evidences, we must be able to put on our critical thinking hats to assess these evidences that are presented to us. We must be able to also put on our ethical perspective lenses, all right, alongside our critical thinking hat in order to make the best decisions for our organization. Only then can we ensure the decision does not backfire, it does not cause any major problems to us. Okay.